My name is Rune Hjarnø. I'm a historian of religion educated from Copenhagen and Uppsala, and I'm working on recovering uh, North European animism. So, everybody talks about today how important indigenous knowledge is in our age of multi-crisis, but most avoid the question of how we can extend that knowledge beyond these somehow limited indigenous groups. Um, I work on trying to build a position with ethical and scholarly integrity, a position of traditional knowledge for majority populations, but also addressing implied questions like what about radical nationalisms and how do we approach these as non-indigenous people without co-opting indigenous culture and so on. Cool. So I think that food culture is incredibly central to animist ways of being in the world. We tend to overlook it sometimes, I think, because availability of food has become a given to us. Food gives us life, of course, and which is why the organisms that are staples in a given human diet often come to be seen as divine. They're givers of life. So the American buffalo is sacred to Lakota, maize to Guatemalan Maya, and yam to some West Africans, and so on. And when you look at Northern Europe, you also find this sacrality and at times kinship in relation to specific organisms. You see this both in the case of domesticated and some non-domesticated species. And here I'm just going to mention two examples just to give you a little feeling of it. The pig and the elder tree, right? So in her book Braiding Sweetgrass here by Robin Kimmerer, she describes how the intense utility of the cattail reed makes it considered a mother in Haudenosaunee culture. So the human usefulness of a wild plant in this case makes it kin, and in parts of Northern Europe you see something similar with the elder tree. This little tree or bush that lives in this close symbiosis with humans, it grows around our houses. It even springs from the foundation, almost as if it wants to get as close to us as possible or grow from the same plot of land that we grow on. It's incredibly rich with contributions to human life. My ethnobotany book counted close to 40 different culinary uses and more than 100 medical uses and as many magical uses. The tree gives these little black berries that are slightly poisonous actually until they're cooked. Then they're just nutrient packed. And this tree has been considered sacred and surrounded with ceremonies and taboo. And the tree has been named the poor man's tree. Or a proverb says that where no elder grows, no humans can live. So the kinship with this tree is probably one of the most hard-lived pieces of Nordic animism in southern Scandinavia, where up close to our own time it was considered a goddess. The mother elder or lady elder, very comparable to this Haudenosaunee cat-tail mother. But this kinship has also been culturally rejected. This here is my grandmother's old cookbook from the early 20th century. It's a trove, actually, of traditional knowledge of how to make a living in this land, but there's not a word about lifting your hat to the elder. There's this a bit of this sort of modernist ethos in there, electricity is a wonderful progress for our upright nationalist peasants who are happily marching, shovels on their shoulders. So what happens here is, I think, that food culture becomes one of the many levers for what I see as a self-colonization, where dominant cultural trends are sort of sanitized of animist kinship. Um, and animist kinship that doesn't align with the modern ontology in which elder trees as our kin is a superstitious nonsense, right? So I think, of course, that we should reconsider this cultural rejection when we're creating our future culture. Hopefully, perhaps moving towards decolonial and sustainable culture where land connection, such as the elder mother, is valued rather than just discarded. So here's another example. When you look at pre-Christian worldviews in Northern Europe, you find that the pig is an important animal. You find boars as heraldic symbols on helmet crests and solemn oaths taken on the bristles of a pig about to be sacrificed. And there are no less than three named mythic pigs in Nordic mythology. In fact, one of the names for the goddess of love, Freya, is Syr in Old Norse, which means sow. Notice how extremely devalued this particular animal has become. I think it's difficult to think of something more ugly, insulting to say to a woman than to call her a sow. But in pre-Christian times, this was a title for the goddess of love. And if we allow ourselves to wield a little bit of a big brush here for a moment, then this extreme devaluation could perhaps be seen as mirrored in the extreme exploitation of this particular animal. Conventional meat production in Denmark, a country of 7 million people, produced 30 million pigs in 2023. And these are animals that are systematically mistreated in this system. This is a country, mind you, where a local story will tell you how part of it was shaped by a mythic pig plowing through the top of Jutland there, where still into the modern era you could find a sacred boar in, oh, sorry, you could find a sacred boar in a village that would be brought specific offerings of some sort of the best harvest fodder, and where you find that slaughtering this animal was a problematic act of violence that was undertaken with great caution. Ceremonial protocols and, folklorists report that butchering an animal, farmers actually cared to avoid the suffering of the animal. And there was ceremonial apologizing to the animal, like you see it among many indigenous animists, that this necessary violence is accompanied by ceremony of appeasement. So my suggestion is, of course, that we consider our own traditional past when trying to move towards sustainable food culture. It's possible that we don't need to become perhaps completely vegan, but what if we actually practice respect for the pig that we eat? What if we make sure that we think of it as a divine, life-giving being that has formed our land, given shape to our existence, that gives up its own life for ours? And that is there in traditional culture. And it would also, I think, probably imply eating a lot less meat. So let's consider context for just a moment here. In Denmark, where I'm from, for instance, we have this populist nationalist movement that has branded itself partly on nostalgia for the past and this fairly repulsive Islamophobia. And here's an example of their sort of white normativity, self-representation. And in this context, we've seen eating pork elevated into a marker of Danishness, conveniently opposed to Muslims who don't eat that. So food, of course, forms very strong identification. Some of you probably remember how vegetarians used to get these very strong reactions, and some of you might have experienced the opposite, that people tell you, you are not like the other white people. You are one of us because you eat our food. Strong identification with food, though. And this is why I have this intuition that a progressive, respect-focused Euro-traditional food culture might have the potential of reaching exactly these people here, because it is their culture, and there also is an aspect of cultural retrospection in what I'm suggesting here that might perhaps align with how they produce their thoughts and ideas. And that means that culturally progressive, perhaps left-wing leaning positions might be able to basically hack some of the appeal that some of these movements have. Um, for instance, these populist movements had this nostalgia for the 1950s as some sort of pre-globalized, boringly gendered golden age where everybody probably ate pig all the time. But I asked my mother about eating culture in the 50s. In her childhood home, they had a soup day, a porridge day, a fish day, and a meat day in a normal working week. The meat day would typically be these characteristic meatballs there, and they would perhaps get two each, and perhaps they'll get a chicken on Saturday. Actually, a very low consumption of meat compared to many today. And I'm pretty sure that my grandmother would probably be morally outraged about food waste today, that one full third of all the food produced globally is just discarded. So this is not to elevate trad wives or anything like that. It's just an image that I think this kind of cultural retrospection might work as a functional lever for sustainable food culture, guiding perhaps communities towards less destructive and more respectful ways of being in the world. Particularly, if we enrich this with contemporary traditional knowledge scholarship, then we might get beyond just a lesser consumption and towards an animist kinship with these organisms as a way of perhaps rebuilding deep land connection through the stuff we eat. Yes, that's what I had to say. Thanks.